He thought he was inheriting a ruined mansion. But his dog refused to step inside. A veteran Navy SEAL, a debt he couldn't escape, and a house no one dared to keep. The moment they arrived, the dog didn't bark, didn't move, just stared, like it remembered something buried. Inside, nothing was stolen, only searched, like someone had been looking for a truth they couldn't find. Then came the offer, money to walk away, before he discovered what was hidden beneath the walls. But the deeper he went, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a house. It was a warning. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Veteran Dog Stories. The envelope arrived on a morning that felt too quiet to be accidental. Rowan Hale sat at the edge of a narrow wooden table inside a roadside cabin that smelled faintly of pine cleaner and old coffee. The place wasn't his. Nothing had been his for a long time, but he had learned how to exist in borrowed spaces. He leaned forward slightly, forearms resting on his knees, the sleeves of his worn olive field jacket creased at the elbows from years of use. The jacket fit him the way certain habits do, unchanged, reliable, and impossible to discard. At 43, Rowan still carried the unmistakable build of a Navy SEAL. He stood just over 6 feet tall, shoulders broad, frame lean, and hardened by years of training that never truly left the body. His face was angular, jawline sharp enough to cast a shadow even in soft light, and his skin bore the sun-worn tone of a man who spent more time outdoors than inside. A thin layer of stubble traced his jaw, not careless, just unbothered. His eyes, a muted blue-gray, were the kind that didn't move unless necessary. They didn't search. They assessed. There was a stillness about him that most people misread as calm. It wasn't. It was control. Across the room, lying near the door, was the only constant in Rowan's life, Ash. The German shepherd lifted his head the moment the envelope hit the table. He was 5, maybe 6 years old, though time moved differently for dogs like him. His body was built for precision, muscle defined but not bulky, posture balanced, every movement deliberate. His coat was black and tan, short and dense, catching light along the edges like brushed steel. His eyes were what people noticed first, dark, focused, always tracking. Ash didn't bark. He never barked unless something had already gone wrong. Rowan picked up the envelope, turning it once in his hand. Cream-colored, formal, expensive. The kind of paper that carried weight even before it carried words. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he exhaled slowly, staring at the return address. Wright and Hale Attorneys, New York. That was new. Ash rose to his feet and walked over without a sound, stopping beside Rowan's knee. He didn't nudge him, didn't whine, just stood there, waiting. Rowan glanced down at him. "Yeah," he muttered, voice low, rough around the edges from disuse. "Feels like trouble." He slid a finger under the seal and opened the letter. By the time he finished reading, the room felt smaller. "You've got to be kidding me." Ash tilted his head slightly. Rowan read the key line again, slower this time, as if the meaning might change if he gave it more space. "You are hereby notified that you are the sole legal heir to the estate of Elias Ren." Elias Ren. The name pulled something faint and distant from the back of Rowan's memory, like a photograph left too long in the sun. A man with quiet eyes, hands that always smelled like machine oil and soil. Someone his parents had rarely spoken about, and when they did, it was with that particular tone reserved for family members who had gone wrong. The estate includes one property located in northern New York State, a Victorian manor constructed in 1891. Rowan frowned. A tax liability of $96,480 is currently outstanding. If unresolved within 30 days, the county will proceed with seizure and demolition of the structure. There it was. Not a gift, a problem. He leaned back in the chair, letting the paper fall loosely into his lap. A manor. Nearly $100,000 in debt. 30 days. Ash shifted his weight, then sat, still watching Rowan. "You ever notice?" Rowan said quietly, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the wall. "How nothing shows up unless it's already too late to walk away?" Ash didn't move. He didn't need to. Rowan rubbed his jaw, the rough stubble scratching against his palm. His gaze drifted to the corner of the room where his pack rested. Eberly stock half-track, scuffed and worn but meticulously organized. Everything he owned that mattered was in there. He could ignore the letter, throw it away, let the county bulldoze whatever was left of that place. No one would blame him. But something about the wording stuck. Not the money. Not even the manner. The timing. Things didn't just arrive in Rowan's life anymore. They resurfaced. And resurfacing meant unfinished. Ash stood. That was all it took. Rowan sighed, pushing himself up from the chair. "Yeah, I figured." The drive north took most of the day. The further Rowan went, the more the world seemed to widen. Cities faded into long stretches of road, then into forests that felt older than memory. Tall pines rose on either side, their trunks straight and silent, their branches filtering sunlight into cold, shifting patterns across the windshield. Ash sat in the passenger seat, alert but relaxed. His head moved occasionally, tracking movement outside, the flicker of a deer between trees, the distant motion of birds. But his breathing stayed even. Rowan kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the gear shift. The old military watch on his wrist ticked steadily, a quiet reminder that time didn't slow just because the road did. He didn't turn on the radio. Silence suited him. Somewhere along the drive, the memory surfaced. Not fully. Just enough. A warehouse. Sand. Heat pressing down like a hand. The sound of metal snapping where it shouldn't. A decision made too fast. Or too slow. A voice. Someone shouting his name. Then nothing. Rowan tightened his grip on the wheel. Ash's ears twitched. The dog didn't look at him. But his posture changed. Subtle, almost imperceptible. A shift in awareness. Rowan exhaled through his nose. "I know," he murmured. "Stay here." He meant in the present. Ash always understood. By the time they reached the dirt road, the light had begun to change. Not darker. Just colder. The road itself was barely more than a narrow strip cutting through dense forest. Grass pushed in from both sides, brushing against the tires. Branches arched overhead, forming a canopy that filtered the sunlight into something softer, almost distant. Rowan slowed the truck. "This has to be it." Ash leaned forward slightly. Not tense. Not yet. Just paying attention. The manor appeared gradually, as if it had been waiting just beyond sight. It wasn't hidden. That was the unsettling part. It stood there in full view, large, unmistakably once grand, its structure still proud despite the years that had worn it down. The Victorian lines were still visible. Steep roof, tall windows, ornate woodwork now dulled and cracked with age. Ivy crept along sections of the walls, not aggressively, but persistently. It didn't look haunted. It looked abandoned by agreement, like something the world had decided not to touch. Rowan eased the truck to a stop. The engine idled for a moment. Then silence. He reached for the door handle. Ash didn't move. Rowan paused. Slowly, he turned his head. Ash was staring straight ahead, not at the house as a whole, but at a specific point, the north side, a section of wall partially obscured by shadow and overgrowth. His body was still, too still. No raised hackles, no growl, just focus. Rowan's fingers tightened on the door handle. He had seen that look before, not in forests, not in abandoned places, but in deserts, under broken buildings, standing over ground that looked exactly like everything around it. Except it wasn't. He released the handle slowly. Ash. The dog didn't blink. Rowan followed his line of sight, narrowing his eyes. There was nothing obvious there. Just wood, age, time, and yet the air felt wrong. Not colder, not darker, just contained, like something sealed too long. Rowan leaned back slightly in his seat. For a moment, neither of them moved. The forest around them remained bright, almost peaceful. Sunlight filtered through the trees, casting soft gold across the clearing. Birds moved somewhere overhead. The wind brushed lightly through the branches. Everything looked normal. Everything felt off. Rowan exhaled slowly. "All right," he said under his breath, not to the house, not even to himself. "To you." Ash's ear flicked. Rowan opened the door and stepped out. The boots hit the dirt with a dull, grounded sound. Ash remained inside, still watching, still waiting. Rowan turned back, resting one hand on the open door. "You coming?" Ash didn't move. Rowan studied him for a long second. Then he nodded once. "Yeah, that's what I thought." He closed the door gently. And for the first time since leaving the road, Rowan Hale felt it. Not fear. Not yet. Something quieter. A question forming slowly, with the weight of everything that had ever gone wrong when he ignored it. Why would a dog trained to find danger refuse to step into a house that looked completely empty? The front door resisted at first, not from strength, but from neglect. Rowan Hale leaned his weight into it, boots planted firm against the warped wooden boards. The hinges groaned in protest, a dry, splintering sound that echoed into the hollow quiet beyond. Then, with a sharp crack, the door gave way just enough for him to push through. The air inside hit differently. Not foul, not rotten. Just still. Like the house had stopped breathing a long time ago and never started again. Rowan stepped in slowly, one hand instinctively hovering near his side as if a weapon should be there, even though it wasn't. Old habits didn't disappear. They just adapted to emptiness. Behind him, the truck engine ticked as it cooled. Ash remained outside. Rowan didn't turn around. He already knew. Inside, light filtered through tall, dust-streaked windows, cutting long, pale shapes across the floor. Furniture stood where it had likely been left decades ago, covered in sheets that had once been white but now sagged under a dull gray film. Nothing felt random. That was the first thing Rowan noticed. Disorder usually had a rhythm. Break-ins, looters, vandals. They left patterns. Panic had a signature. This place didn't. It felt like someone had gone room by room, carefully, searching. Rowan moved forward, boots pressing softly against the wooden floor. Each step tested the boards, not for noise, but for weakness. He paused occasionally, listening, not for sound, for absence. The house didn't creak the way old houses should. That bothered him. He reached the main hall and stopped. A staircase curved upward in a graceful arc, its railing carved with intricate detail, now dulled by time. To the right, a doorway opened into what had once been a sitting room. Rowan stepped inside. That's where the pattern became clear. Drawers pulled out, but not smashed. Books removed, but not scattered wildly. Cabinets opened, then left exactly where they were. Someone had been methodical, and they had come up empty. Rowan crouched near a desk, running his fingers across the surface. Dust lifted in a thin line beneath his touch. "No rush," he murmured. Not to himself. To whoever had done this. They had time. A soft movement at the doorway pulled his attention. Ash, the German shepherd, had finally stepped inside. But not fully. He stood just over the threshold, muscles taut. Not in fear, but in restraint. His head remained low, nose working slowly through the air. Every few seconds his ears shifted, catching something Rowan couldn't hear. Rowan watched him for a moment. "You smell it too." Ash didn't respond, but his gaze flicked briefly toward the back of the house before returning to Rowan. Not a command. A suggestion. Rowan stood. "All right." They moved deeper. The kitchen showed the same signs. Systematic disturbance, not chaos. A cupboard stood open, its contents gone. A rusted sink sat beneath a window, looking out into the forest beyond. Light spilled in, clean, almost warm. Outside was life. Inside was interruption. Rowan stepped closer to the window, eyes scanning the tree line. The forest stretched endlessly, tall pines standing like silent witnesses. Nothing moved. But something had been here, more than once. A voice broke the stillness. "Didn't think anyone would come back." Rowan turned instantly. Ash moved faster. The dog stepped forward, body angled protectively in front of Rowan, posture shifting into something sharper. Alert, calculating. At the doorway stood an old man. He hadn't made a sound coming up the porch. That alone told Rowan something. The man was tall, though age had bent him slightly forward. His frame was thin but not fragile, the kind built from years of labor rather than comfort. His face was deeply lined, skin weathered like old leather, and a thin gray mustache traced the line of his upper lip. His eyes, pale and steady, carried something that wasn't fear, recognition. He wore a faded brown canvas jacket over a flannel shirt, the sleeves rolled just enough to reveal forearms marked with old scars. Work boots, cracked, worn, still functional. He didn't step inside. He respected the threshold. "That your dog?" he asked, voice low, rough but even. Rowan didn't answer right away. Ash didn't move. "Yes," Rowan said finally. The old man nodded once. "Good." A pause. "Means you'll listen when you need to." Rowan studied him. "You've been here before?" It wasn't a question. The man gave a faint, humorless smile. "Longer than you've been alive." He shifted slightly, resting one hand against the doorframe. "Name's Harold Pike." Rowan straightened. "Rowan Hale." Harold's gaze lingered on him for a moment, taking in the stance, the shoulders, the eyes. "Military," he said. Rowan didn't confirm it, didn't deny it. Harold nodded anyway. "Figures." His eyes moved past Rowan, scanning the room with quiet familiarity. "They came through here already," he said. Rowan's jaw tightened slightly. "You saw them?" "Didn't need to," Harold replied. "House tells you if you know how to listen." Ash shifted again, just a slight movement of his head. Harold noticed. "That one knows too." They moved into the hall together, Harold staying near the walls, never stepping too far in. "People around here said Elias lost his mind," Harold said, almost casually. Talked about things that weren't there. Said someone was watching him. Rowan glanced toward the staircase. You believe that? Harold's answer came without hesitation. No. A beat. I know he was right. Rowan stopped walking. Harold met his gaze. Man doesn't spend 20 years preparing for something unless it's real. Rowan felt something shift. Not outside, but somewhere deeper. What happened to him? Rowan asked. Harold exhaled slowly, as if deciding how much to say. Dam project, he said. Up north. Logging company tied into it. Big money. Big promises. His voice hardened slightly. Something went wrong. Structure failed. Men died. Rowan didn't move. And Elias? He asked. He spoke up, Harold said. Said it wasn't an accident. Another pause. They made sure everyone else thought it was. Rowan's gaze drifted briefly to Ash. The dog had turned away from them, focused now on the far end of the hall. Not moving, not reacting, just locked in. Ash walked forward slowly, each step deliberate. He passed the staircase, past the open rooms, until he reached a closed door at the end of the hall. He stopped, lowered his head, and pressed his nose against the wood. Then he scratched once, not frantic, not aggressive, precise. Rowan felt it immediately, that same sensation. The one before something hidden became visible. Behind him, Harold's voice dropped to almost a whisper. He never let anyone in that room. Rowan stepped forward. Ash didn't move away. He stayed exactly where he was, waiting. Rowan reached for the handle. The door resisted, then opened slowly with a low, dragging sound. The room beyond was larger than expected. A library, or what used to be one. Shelves lined the walls, some intact, others partially emptied. Books sat in uneven rows, many missing, leaving gaps that felt intentional. A large table stood in the center, covered in scattered papers. Not random, grouped, organized, interrupted. Rowan stepped inside. Ash followed, but only a few steps. Then he stopped again. Same spot, same tension. Rowan turned slowly, scanning the room. His eyes moved across the walls, across the shelves, across the structure itself. Something didn't feel right. Not visually, structurally. He walked to the far wall and placed his hand against it, solid. But he stepped back, measured the distance with his eyes, turned, measured again. Harold watched him from the doorway. You see it? The old man said quietly. Rowan didn't answer. He moved again, counting steps this time, one direction, then the other. His brow tightened. Doesn't match, he muttered. Didn't for him either, Harold said. Rowan turned back to the wall. Ash scratched again, same spot. Rowan crouched beside him, running his fingers lightly across the surface. The wood felt different. Not newer, just wrong. He tapped it once. A dull sound. Then again, slightly to the side, same. Then he shifted his hand just a few inches, tapped again. The sound changed. Not louder, hollow. Rowan froze. Not from surprise, from confirmation. He stood slowly, eyes fixed on the wall. Behind him, Harold didn't move, didn't speak, because there was nothing left to say. Rowan exhaled quietly. Someone hid something here, he said. Ash stepped back, just enough to give him space. Rowan's voice dropped, almost to himself. And whoever came looking, his eyes traced the damaged shelves. Didn't find it. The room fell silent again, but it wasn't empty anymore. because now they knew. The light had shifted by the time Rowan stepped out of the library. It wasn't darker, just quieter. The kind of quiet that made every movement feel like it mattered more than it should. Harold Pike remained near the doorway, his shoulders slightly hunched, as though years of watching had taught him never to stand fully exposed. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. The look in Rowan's eyes told him enough. "You found something," Harold said. Rowan didn't answer directly. He walked past him into the hall, Ash moving in close at his side now, no longer lingering behind. "Someone was looking for it," Rowan said instead. Harold nodded once. "Been that way a long time." Rowan paused near the front door, glancing outside. The clearing beyond the manor stretched open under pale afternoon light. The forest stood still, tall and indifferent. But something felt different. Not wrong. Not yet. Just watched. Ash stopped walking. His body stiffened, not violently, but with a controlled precision Rowan had come to trust more than his own instincts. The dog's ears tilted forward, his head lifted, and then he moved. Not toward the back of the house, toward the front, toward the door. Rowan's gaze sharpened. "Someone's here," he said quietly. Harold didn't argue. He stepped back instinctively, placing himself just behind the wall beside the entrance, out of sight, but close enough to hear. Rowan opened the door. The man standing outside looked like he belonged anywhere, except here. Victor Cain stood on the worn wooden porch as if it were marble flooring beneath his feet. He was tall, slightly taller than Rowan, with a lean frame hidden beneath a charcoal overcoat tailored to perfection. Not a wrinkle out of place. His posture was effortless, upright, controlled, like someone who had never needed to defend himself physically because the world had always bent in quieter ways. His face was sharp, not harsh, just defined, clean-shaven, dark hair carefully styled, with the faintest hint of silver at the temples. His eyes were what lingered, dark, calm, and distant, like he was always thinking several steps ahead of the moment he stood in. "Mr. Hale," Victor said, his voice smooth, measured, carrying just enough warmth to feel intentional. Rowan didn't step aside. "You found me fast." Victor's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "I make it a point to stay informed." His gaze flicked briefly past Rowan into the house, taking in the dim interior with a single glance that somehow seemed to catalog everything without lingering on anything. Then his eyes dropped to Ash. The dog stood between them now, still, silent, but no longer neutral. His chest rose and fell slower than usual, but deeper. His weight shifted forward just slightly, positioning himself, not in defense of Rowan alone, but as a barrier. Victor noticed. Of course he did. "A working dog," he said. "German Shepherd. Military trained, I assume." Rowan didn't respond. Victor looked back up at him. "They're excellent judges of character," he added lightly. Rowan's jaw tightened just enough to register. "What do you want?" Victor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a slim leather folder. Dark, polished, expensive in a way that didn't need to announce itself. He opened it slowly. Inside were documents, and a number written in clean, deliberate ink. $300,000, Victor said. No hesitation, no build-up. Cash equivalent, immediate transfer. You sign today, the property becomes mine. The tax issue disappears. You walk away with more than this place will ever give you. The number hung in the air. 300,000. Rowan felt the weight of it. Not emotionally, but mathematically. Debts erased. Freedom. Distance. A clean exit. Victor studied him carefully, watching not his reaction, but his restraint. "You've seen enough inside to know what it is," Victor continued. "Old structure, failing integrity, sentimental value at best, a liability at worst." Rowan said nothing. Ash didn't move. Victor took a slow step forward, not aggressive, just closer. And that's when he made the mistake. "It's unfortunate, really," Victor said, glancing briefly toward the side of the house. "Given the condition of the lower structure, I'm surprised it hasn't collapsed already." Rowan's eyes sharpened instantly. Lower structure. There was no record of any sublevel, no basement, no extension beneath the foundation, nothing. Victor's gaze returned to him, calm as ever, but something flickered just for a fraction of a second. Recognition. He knew what he'd said. Too late. Ash reacted before Rowan could. His body shifted forward in one smooth motion, placing himself directly between Rowan and Victor. Not lunging, not barking, just blocking. His head lowered slightly, his eyes locked. His breathing changed. That was the signal. Rowan had seen it in places where people didn't get second chances. This wasn't about scent. Not entirely. Ash was reading him, reading Victor, and he didn't like what he found. Rowan's voice dropped. "There's no basement here." Victor held his gaze. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Victor exhaled softly, closing the folder with a quiet, deliberate motion. "A figure of speech," he said. But it wasn't. Rowan knew it. And Victor knew Rowan knew it. The air between them changed. Not louder. Just sharper. Ash took one step forward. Just one. But it was enough. His ears flattened, not in fear, but in focus. His gaze didn't waver, and for the first time since Rowan had known him, there was something else in that stillness. Recognition. Not of the place, not of the smell, of the man. Rowan felt it in his chest before he understood it in his mind. Ash wasn't reacting to danger. He was reacting to something he had been trained to remember. And that meant this wasn't the first time a man like Victor Cain had stood in front of them. Victor straightened his coat slightly, as though brushing off something invisible. "I'll give you until tomorrow," he said. "Noon." His tone remained calm, almost courteous, but the edges had shifted. "You'll find that opportunities like this don't tend to wait." Rowan didn't respond. Victor stepped back, descending the porch with measured steps. His shoes made no sound against the wood, as if even the house refused to acknowledge his presence. At the bottom, he paused, looked back. "You're standing on something valuable, Mr. Hale," he said quietly. Not a threat. Not quite. But value has a way of attracting the wrong kind of attention. A beat. Then, almost as an afterthought, "You don't understand what you're standing on." He turned and walked toward the black sedan parked at the edge of the clearing. The engine started without hesitation. The car pulled away, disappearing down the narrow road, swallowed slowly by the trees. Silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence. Harold stepped out from behind the wall, his face tighter than before. "That him?" he asked. Rowan nodded once. Harold spat lightly to the side. "Figures." Rowan watched the empty road for a long moment. Then he looked down at Ash. The dog had relaxed, but not fully. His posture remained alert, as if the moment hadn't passed, only paused. "You knew," Rowan said quietly. Ash met his gaze. No hesitation, no confusion, just certainty. Rowan exhaled slowly, running a hand over the back of his neck. 300,000. Walk away, forget the house, forget Elias, forget whatever was buried in those walls. It would be the smart choice, the safe one, the kind of decision people made when they wanted to survive. Rowan had made that kind of decision once before. It hadn't ended well. He turned back toward the house. The windows reflected the fading light, giving nothing away. But inside, there was something unfinished, something someone had tried very hard to find, and someone else had tried even harder to hide. Rowan's voice came out low, steady. "If I sell this place..." He paused. Ash watched him. "I never find out what that was." The dog didn't move. Didn't need to. Rowan nodded once. Decision made. Not out loud, not dramatically. Just settled. "Yeah," he muttered. "Not happening." He stepped back inside the house. This time Ash didn't hesitate. He followed immediately. Rowan didn't rush it. That was the first thing that separated this moment from everything that had come before in his life. In the past, urgency had always been the enemy, forcing decisions, collapsing options, turning seconds into mistakes that lasted years. Now, he stood in the quiet library, staring at the wall that didn't belong. Ash remained beside him, closer than before. Not tense, not aggressive, just anchored. The dog's presence felt deliberate, like a weight placed exactly where it needed to be. Rowan ran his hand slowly across the wooden panels again, feeling the subtle differences in texture. His fingers paused over the section that had given that hollow response earlier. He exhaled. "All right," he murmured. Not hesitation. Acceptance. He stepped back, scanning the room. The library still carried the same strange order, interrupted but not destroyed. Whatever had been hidden here, it hadn't been found. Not yet. Rowan moved to the center table and picked up one of the scattered objects, a rusted metal paperweight. It wasn't ideal, but it would do. He returned to the wall. Ash shifted slightly, repositioning himself closer to Rowan's left side, eyes fixed on the exact point where Rowan raised his arm. The first strike was controlled, not a swing of anger, a test. Wood splintered, not loudly, but with a brittle crack that echoed strangely through the room. Dust fell in a thin curtain, catching the light before settling to the floor. Rowan didn't stop. The second strike landed harder. Then a third. Each impact peeled away layers of craftsmanship that had been designed not to be noticed. Behind the paneling, older material revealed itself. Plaster, then lath, then something darker, something unnatural. Ash stepped forward, not reacting, approaching. His nose lifted, pulling in the air that now seeped through the fractured wall. Rowan paused. The smell hit him a second later. Not rot, not decay, oil, metal, and something colder than both. He struck again. The wall gave way in a larger section this time, collapsing inward with a hollow, collapsing sound that didn't belong to a simple structure. Dust surged outward, filling the air. Rowan stepped back, raising his arm to shield his face. When the dust settled, it was there. Steel. Not decorative, not structural in the traditional sense. Purpose-built. A door. Ash stood directly in front of it now, still, silent. Rowan lowered his arm slowly. "Jesus!" The door was set into the space with precision, edges flush, surface matte, and aged but intact. No visible handle, No obvious mechanism, just a seam, a thin, deliberate line where it met the surrounding frame. Rowan stepped closer. His reflection stared back at him in the faint sheen of the metal, distorted, fragmented. "Who were you, Elias?" he whispered. Behind him, Harold Pike didn't speak. He hadn't entered the room, but Rowan could feel him there, watching from the doorway, as if crossing that threshold meant stepping into something irreversible. Rowan reached out. His fingers brushed the surface. Cold. Not just temperature. Presence. He traced the edge until he found it. A recessed grip, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. He hesitated. Not out of fear, out of recognition. Once you opened something like this, you didn't close it again. Ash shifted his weight slightly. Rowan glanced at him. The dog met his gaze. No warning, no resistance, just certainty. That was enough. Rowan pulled. The door opened with a low, hydraulic exhale. Not loud, but deep, like something waking up. Cold air rushed past them, carrying with it that same scent, oil, metal, and something sealed too long. Darkness waited beyond. Not empty darkness, structured darkness. Rowan stepped forward, instinctively reaching into his pocket for the small flashlight clipped inside his jacket. He flicked it on, the beam cutting a narrow path into the void. A staircase, metal, descending. Not part of the original house, not even close. This had been built after. Deliberately. "Stay here," Rowan said quietly. Ash didn't. He stepped down first. Rowan almost smiled. "Yeah, figured." They descended together. Each step rang softly under their weight, the sound absorbed quickly by the enclosed space. The air grew cooler, not uncomfortable, but controlled. That was the word. Controlled. At the bottom, the space opened. Not into a basement. Into something else entirely. Rowan stopped. The beam of his flashlight swept slowly across the room. Concrete walls, reinforced. Steel supports, industrial grade. Wiring, contained, organized, deliberate. This wasn't a hiding place. This was infrastructure. "Jesus," Rowan said again, softer this time. Behind him, Ash moved forward, his paws silent against the smooth floor. His nose worked constantly now, mapping the space in ways Rowan couldn't. Rowan stepped further in. A generator sat against the far wall, silent but intact. Control panels lined one side, switches labeled in neat, precise handwriting. A ventilation system ran overhead, ducts sealed and reinforced, designed to function independently. Elias hadn't built a secret. He had built a system. Ash stopped abruptly. Not near Rowan, not near the entrance. At the far wall. Rowan turned, watching as the dog approached a section covered in boards and paper. Layers pinned together in what looked like chaos from a distance. But up close, it wasn't chaos. It was structure. Ash sat. Not alert, not tense. Still. And then, he looked back at Rowan, not like a dog waiting for a command. Like something that had already made a decision. Rowan felt it settle in his chest. This wasn't random. Ash hadn't found this place. He had followed it. Rowan approached slowly. The wall revealed itself piece by piece. Photographs, documents, maps. Connections drawn in ink. Some faded, some pressed so hard the paper beneath had torn. Names repeated. Dates circled. Numbers that didn't make sense until they did. Rowan reached out, lifting one of the photographs. A construction site. Men in hard hats, heavy equipment. A dam. On the back, written in firm, controlled handwriting. Load reduction unauthorized. Structural integrity compromised. Rowan's jaw tightened. He grabbed another, a ledger. Numbers didn't match. Money moved where it shouldn't. Amounts shifted, redirected, concealed. Another document, an inspection report, signed, approved, stamped, and beneath it, a second version, altered, reduced, hidden. Rowan stepped back slowly. This wasn't an accident. He didn't say it as a realization. He said it as confirmation. Ash moved again, guiding him, not physically, but through presence. Rowan followed. Toward a row of safes, 6 of them. Industrial, massive, 5 sealed, 1 open. Inside the open safe, nothing of value in the traditional sense. No gold, no cash, just files, carefully preserved. Rowan flipped through them. Witness statements, original blueprints, engineering notes, everything someone would need to prove intent, to prove knowledge, to prove guilt. Rowan exhaled slowly. He built a case, he said, not to Harold, not to Ash, to the room itself. He didn't hide anything. He documented everything. Ash stood beside him now. Still, steady, Rowan looked down at him. You knew that, didn't you? Ash didn't respond, but he didn't look away either. Rowan closed the file. His mind moved faster now, not in panic, but in alignment. Victor hadn't come for the house. He had come for this, for the evidence, for the thing that could destroy everything he had built. Rowan turned slowly, scanning the space again. That's when he noticed it. Not on the walls, not on the safes. Above. A vent, small, reinforced, air moving through it, subtle but real, not part of a sealed system, a path. He stepped closer, ran his hand along the edge, fresh air, faint, but undeniable. Ash was already there, waiting. Rowan let out a quiet breath. You're not just finding things. He looked at the dog. You're leading me. Ash held his gaze. For a moment, the world narrowed to that silent understanding. Then Rowan nodded. All right. He turned back toward the room. The evidence, the safes, the system Elias had built with everything he had left. This wasn't about survival anymore. It wasn't even about money. It was about something older, something heavier. Truth. Rowan picked up one of the files again, holding it in his hand with a weight that had nothing to do with paper. If I walk away from this. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to, because he already knew. Ash did too. Rowan set the file back carefully. Not abandoned, not ignored, acknowledged. Then he turned toward the staircase, not to leave, to think, because for the first time since stepping into the manor, Rowan Hale wasn't reacting anymore. He was choosing. Rowan didn't realize the system was still alive until it looked back at him. He had just stepped away from the evidence wall, mind racing, when a faint electrical hum stirred somewhere behind him. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet, mechanical awakening, as if something had been waiting patiently for a trigger that had finally been met. The old monitors flickered, one by one. Ash's head snapped toward the sound before Rowan could even turn. The German shepherd moved instantly, positioning himself between Rowan and the glow of the screens. His posture shifted, not defensive this time, but anticipatory. His muscles tightened, weight forward, ears angled with surgical precision. Rowan stepped beside him, eyes narrowing. 6 screens came alive, grainy, black and white. Each one showed a different angle of the house above. The front porch, the hallway, the staircase, the library, the broken wall now exposed like an open wound, and the driveway. Rowan's breath slowed. A black sedan, back again. But this time, it wasn't alone. 2 more vehicles followed behind it. Dark, unmarked, engines still running. Doors opened almost in unison. Victor Cain stepped out first. He looked the same. Perfect. Controlled. But something had shifted. The patience was gone. Behind him, 2 men moved forward with purpose. They were not like Victor. They were built for action. The first man was large, thick shoulders, heavy arms, neck too wide for comfort. His face was blunt, square, with a scar running from his temple down to his jaw. His expression carried no curiosity, only execution. He wore a dark jacket, unzipped, revealing the outline of a firearm holstered against his chest. The second was leaner, taller. His movements quieter, but sharper. His eyes scanned constantly, calculating angles, distances. The kind of man who didn't need to be told what to do, he already knew. Professionals, not hired muscle. Rowan's jaw tightened. "Yeah," he murmured under his breath. That escalated. Ash didn't move. His gaze locked onto the screens, not panicked, focused. The audio crackled to life. "Find them," Victor's voice echoed faintly through hidden microphones. Calm, but colder now. "I want the house cleared." The large man nodded once and moved toward the front door. The lean one followed. Rowan exhaled slowly. They're not here to negotiate anymore. Ash's breathing shifted. Faster now. Controlled, but ready. Rowan's eyes moved across the room quickly, taking in the layout again. The staircase behind them. The steel door above. The ventilation shaft. The safes. No. Staying here wasn't an option. A loud metallic clang echoed from above. The door, forced open. They were inside. Rowan moved instantly. "Come on." He grabbed a stack of documents, only what he could carry, stuffing them into his pack with quick, efficient movements. No hesitation, no overthinking. Ash was already moving. Not randomly, not panicked, guided. The dog headed straight for the far wall, toward the ventilation path Rowan had noticed earlier. Rowan followed. Behind them, another sound. Footsteps. Heavy. Closer. Too fast. "They found it," Rowan muttered. Then, a deep mechanical rumble filled the space. The steel door above, closing. Rowan turned just in time to see it through the narrow opening, the massive slab of reinforced metal sliding into place, sealing the entrance from the inside. A failsafe, or a trap. Either way, they were cut off. "Great," Rowan breathed. "Now we're locked in with them." Ash didn't look back. He was already at the vent, not just standing there, working. His nose pressed along the edge, his paws scraping lightly, testing, finding. Rowan reached him just as Ash stopped. The vent wasn't just ventilation. It had been reinforced, expanded, modified. A passage. "Elias," Rowan whispered. "You planned for this." A sudden noise cut through the air behind them. A sharp crack. Gunfire. The sound slammed into the confined space, echoing violently. A bullet struck the metal wall nearby, sparks flashing briefly in the dim light. Ash flinched. Not backward. Forward. He turned, placing himself between Rowan and the direction of the sound. Body lowered, eyes locked into the darkness beyond. Rowan felt something tighten in his chest. Not fear. Memory. A different place. A different mission. A voice yelling, "Don't leave me!" Rowan's grip tightened around the strap of his pack. Not this time. Not again. "Move," Rowan said, voice low but firm. He kicked at the reinforced panel. Once. Twice. The metal bent just enough. Ash lunged forward, pushing through the opening first, disappearing into the narrow passage beyond. Rowan followed. The tunnel wasn't comfortable. It wasn't meant to be. Dirt walls reinforced with timber supports, angled upward at a slight incline. The air smelled of earth and age, but also movement. Fresh air, not sealed. That meant it led somewhere. Good. Behind them, the footsteps were closer now. The lean man's voice echoed faintly. "Boss, we've got movement below." Victor's reply came calm. "Then don't let them reach the exit." Rowan moved faster. The tunnel forced him low, shoulders scraping occasionally against the wood. His breathing stayed controlled, even as his muscles burned from the awkward pace. Ash stayed ahead, always just far enough to guide, always just visible in the beam of Rowan's flashlight. Then, Ash stopped. Rowan nearly collided with him. "What?" The dog had turned back. Not confused, not lost, something else. Rowan looked past him. The tunnel ahead narrowed sharply, collapsed partially, barely passable. And then, he saw it. A piece of wood, broken support beam jammed into the space. Behind it, Ash's harness was caught. The dog shifted, trying to pull free, but the angle was wrong. He couldn't move forward, couldn't turn. He was stuck. Rowan froze for just a second. Behind him, footsteps. Closer. The echo of boots in the metal stairwell. They were coming, fast. Rowan looked forward. The exit was close. He could feel it. Fresh air, distance, safety. Then he looked at Ash. The dog didn't struggle, didn't panic. He just looked at Rowan, waiting, trusting. Rowan's chest tightened. Another memory, another moment, another decision. Leave him or go back. His jaw clenched. "Not happening," he whispered. He dropped the pack, turned, and went back. His hands worked fast, pulling at the harness, adjusting the angle, forcing the beam loose. Ash didn't move, didn't resist, just held still, trusting. A loud crash echoed behind them. They were in the tunnel. Rowan didn't look back. Almost, the beam snapped free. Ash surged forward immediately. This time, he didn't slow. He led. Rowan grabbed the pack and followed. The tunnel widened slightly, then sloped upward. Then, light, faint, real. They burst out into open air. The ruins of the old structure stood around them. Collapsed stone, broken beams. Remnants of something that had existed long before the manor above. The sky stretched open overhead, pale and wide. Rowan staggered forward, catching his breath. Ash turned immediately, scanning the surroundings. Alert, focused, but alive. That was enough. Rowan rested his hands on his knees for a moment, breathing hard. Then he straightened. His eyes moved across the ruins and stopped. There, half buried beneath debris, a metal case, weathered, locked, but intact. Rowan approached slowly, knelt, ran his hand across the surface, cold, solid, deliberate. He looked at Ash. The dog stood beside him. Still, certain. Rowan exhaled slowly. "Of course," he said. He opened the case. Inside, documents. Not copies, not notes. Originals, final proof. The kind of evidence that didn't just suggest truth, it forced it. Rowan closed the case carefully. Behind them, faintly, voices. They would find the tunnel, eventually. But not in time. Rowan stood, slung the case over his shoulder, and looked out toward the forest. "Let's go," he said. Ash moved first, and this time, Rowan didn't hesitate. He followed. The forest swallowed sound. That was the first thing Rowan noticed as they moved deeper between the trees. Branches brushed lightly against his jacket, boots sinking into damp soil softened by years of fallen needles and rain. The light above filtered down in long fractured beams, turning the air into something almost golden. Peaceful. Too peaceful. Ash didn't relax. The German shepherd moved ahead of Rowan now, not wandering, not exploring, tracking. His body remained low, controlled, every step calculated. His ears shifted constantly, catching things Rowan couldn't hear, his nose testing the air in short, deliberate pulls. Rowan tightened his grip on the metal case slung across his shoulder. Final proof. The kind of weight that didn't show on the outside, but changed everything once it existed. They had put distance between themselves and the ruins. Not enough, but enough to breathe. For now. Ash stopped. Instantly. Rowan halted behind him, his body responding before his mind caught up. The dog didn't growl, didn't bark. He simply stood still, listening. Rowan's eyes narrowed. Then he saw him. Victor Cain stepped out from between the trees as if the forest itself had made room for him. No car, no backup in sight, just him. His coat was gone now, the charcoal fabric replaced by a fitted dark jacket, sleeves slightly rolled, as though he had finally stepped out of whatever polished world he usually occupied and into something more direct. But nothing about him looked out of place, not even here. His hair remained perfectly in place despite the humidity, his expression calm, measured, controlled, as always. "You're persistent," Victor said. His voice carried easily through the quiet, not raised, but precise. Rowan didn't answer. Ash moved, one step forward, positioning himself between them. Victor's gaze dropped briefly to the dog. Something unreadable passed through his eyes. Not fear, not irritation, recognition. "You're a long way from the house," Victor continued. "Not the direction I expected." Rowan shifted his stance slightly, weight balanced, shoulders loose, but ready. "You're a long way from pretending this is a business deal," he replied. Victor's lips curved faintly. Not a smile. Acknowledgement. "That phase ended when you broke the wall." A pause. The forest seemed to lean in around them. Victor stepped closer. No weapon in his hands. None visible. But that didn't mean anything. "You found it," he said. Not a question. Rowan didn't confirm. Victor nodded slowly anyway. "Of course you did." He tilted his head slightly, studying Rowan now. Not the surface, but something deeper. "The question is, what you plan to do with it?" Rowan remained silent. Ash didn't move. The air thickened. Victor's voice softened. Not weaker, sharper. "Do you think the truth has value?" he asked. Not rhetorical, not mocking. Genuine. Rowan's eyes didn't leave him. Victor took another step. "More than survival," he continued. A beat. Then, "More than the life of the people standing in its way?" The words landed quietly, but they carried weight. Ash's breathing shifted. Not faster, deeper. His muscles tensed, not in fear, but in readiness. Rowan felt something settle inside him. This wasn't a standoff. Not in the way people imagined. No drawn guns, no shouting. This was something else. A line. And the question wasn't who would cross it. It was who already had. Ash moved again. Not forward, sideways. Placing himself slightly ahead of Rowan, but angled, not blocking completely. Protecting, but allowing space. Rowan noticed it immediately. Ash wasn't preparing to attack. He was preparing for a decision. The dog's head turned slightly, just enough for Rowan to see his eyes. Not fixed on Victor. On him. Waiting. Not for a command, for a choice. Rowan felt it hit him all at once. This wasn't about winning. This wasn't about escaping. This was about who he was, when it mattered. And for the first time in years. Rowan Hale didn't look away. Victor watched the shift, subtle. But there, you already know how this ends, Victor said. His tone wasn't threatening, it was certain. You take that evidence to the wrong place, and it disappears, he continued. Local authorities, county offices, anyone within reach of the system. His eyes held Rowan's. I built that system. No pride, no apology, just fact. Rowan exhaled slowly. Then I don't take it to them. Victor's expression didn't change. But something behind it recalculated. Smart, he said quietly, but not enough. He stepped closer. Now they stood only a few feet apart, close enough for Rowan to see the fine details, the faint lines at the corners of Victor's eyes, the almost imperceptible tension in his jaw, the kind that only appeared when control wasn't absolute. You think federal is untouchable? Victor asked. You think power stops at jurisdiction? Rowan didn't respond, because he didn't need to. He already knew something Victor didn't. Or maybe something Victor refused to believe. Rowan reached slowly into his pocket. Victor's posture shifted, barely. But enough. Ash tensed. Rowan pulled out his phone. Not a threat, not a weapon, just a number. He hit call. Victor didn't stop him, didn't move. He simply watched. Because somewhere, deep down, he still believed this could be contained. The call connected. A woman's voice answered. Clear, steady. Mara Bellamy. Rowan spoke without hesitation. Mara. It's Rowan Hale. A brief silence, then. I was wondering when you'd call. Mara Bellamy didn't sound surprised. That told Rowan everything he needed to know. She had been watching, waiting. Mara was in her mid-30s, a forest ranger who had spent more years in the wilderness than most people spent behind desks. She was tall, lean, with weathered skin touched by sun and wind. Her brown hair usually pulled back into a tight knot. Her eyes were sharp, not suspicious, but aware. The kind of person who noticed what didn't belong. And more importantly, she knew who to trust. Do you have it? She asked. Yes. Then don't come back to town, Mara said. I'll meet you halfway. And Rowan, her voice tightened slightly. Bring everything. The line went dead. Rowan lowered the phone. Victor didn't speak for a moment. Then, you chose. Not anger, not surprise. Just confirmation. Rowan met his gaze. Yeah. Ash relaxed slightly. Not fully, but enough. Victor exhaled slowly. For the first time since Rowan had met him, he looked human. Not weak, not broken, just aware. You understand what happens next, Victor said. It wasn't a threat. It was truth. Rowan nodded once. I do. Victor studied him for a long moment. Then he stepped back, no sudden movement, no last attempt. He turned and walked away. No rush, no fear. Just a man who had already started calculating his next move. 2 hours later, Mara Bellamy stood at the edge of a dirt clearing, hands resting lightly on her hips as Rowan approached. She looked exactly as Rowan remembered, practical, grounded, real. Her moss-green ranger parka blended into the surrounding forest, her boots worn but well kept, her stance balanced like someone who had learned to stand firm in unstable ground. Her eyes moved from Rowan to Ash to the case. "You weren't exaggerating," she said. Rowan handed it over. She didn't open it immediately. She didn't need to. She could feel it. "Federal's already on its way," Mara said quietly. "I made a call before you did." Rowan raised an eyebrow. "Paranoid?" Mara gave a faint smile. "Prepared?" Ash sat beside Rowan now, still, watching. The distant sound of vehicles echoed faintly through the trees. Not hurried, not chaotic, controlled. Black SUVs emerged along the dirt path, moving with quiet authority. Doors opened. Agents stepped out. Disciplined, focused. Among them, a woman, mid-40s, sharp eyes, short dark hair pulled back cleanly. Her suit was simple, functional, designed for movement rather than display. She approached without hesitation. "Special Agent Catherine Reeves," she said, extending a hand briefly. "FBI." Rowan didn't take it. Not out of disrespect, just habit. She didn't seem offended. Her eyes moved to the case. "Is that it?" Rowan nodded. Mara handed it over. Reeves opened it carefully, scanning the contents with a practiced eye. Her expression didn't change. But something in her posture did. Tightened. Focused. "This is enough," she said quietly. A beat. Then, "This is everything." She closed the case, turned to her team. "Secure it. Chain of custody now." Agents moved immediately. No hesitation. No confusion. Reeves looked back at Rowan. "You just brought down more than a single operation," she said. Her voice was calm but certain. "This ties into multiple investigations. Financial, structural fraud, wrongful deaths." She paused, met his eyes. "This isn't one case." A breath. "This is a system." Rowan exhaled slowly. Behind him, Ash shifted slightly, then settled again. For the first time, his posture loosened. Not completely, but enough. Reeves gave a small nod. "We'll take it from here." Rowan didn't respond, because there was nothing left to say. Somewhere far beyond the trees, Victor Cain was already moving, but for the first time, he wasn't ahead. Autumn came quietly. It didn't arrive with a storm or a shift that could be marked on a calendar. It simply unfolded, leaf by leaf, color by color, until the forest around the old manor no longer looked abandoned. It looked alive. Rowan Hale stood at the edge of the clearing, hands resting loosely at his sides, watching the sunlight fall across the restored roofline. The slate tiles had been replaced one by one, not to make the house new, but to make it whole again. The woodwork along the porch had been repaired, not polished. The structure stood as it always had, aged, grounded, real. He hadn't changed what it was. He had just refused to let it disappear. The government had come and gone. Investigators, engineers, lawyers, men and women in suits who spoke in quiet tones and wrote things down carefully. They had sealed off the underground structure, documented every inch of it, and taken the evidence that Elias Ren had spent a lifetime protecting. It had been enough. Not just to open a case, to unravel one. Victor Cain's name had surfaced across departments, across states, across records that had once existed separately, but now pointed toward something singular and undeniable. A pattern, a system. Rowan hadn't followed it beyond that. He didn't need to. Some battles weren't fought in places like this. But this place, still mattered. Behind him, the sound of slow footsteps crossed the porch. Ash, the German shepherd, moved with the same controlled grace he always had. But something about him had changed in the weeks since they had left the forest with that case in hand. The tension was gone. Not entirely, but enough. He stepped onto the porch and lowered himself onto the wooden boards, stretching out fully, head resting between his paws. No scanning, no tracking, just stillness. Rowan glanced back at him. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he walked up the steps and sat down beside the dog. "You're getting soft," he muttered. Ash didn't respond. He didn't need to. His breathing remained slow, steady, even. For the first time since Rowan had known him, Ash wasn't watching the world. He was resting in it. Rowan leaned back slightly, resting his elbows on his knees, eyes drifting out toward the trees. "You were right," he said quietly. The words didn't come easily. They never did. But they mattered. Because for a long time, Rowan had stopped trusting anything that couldn't be measured, calculated, confirmed. He had learned that instinct could be wrong, that hesitation could cost lives, that decisions made in seconds could echo for years. And because of that, he had stopped listening. Until Ash. A truck pulled into the clearing, tires crunching softly against gravel. Rowan didn't stand. He didn't need to. He already knew who it was. Mara Bellamy stepped out, closing the door behind her with a quiet push of her hand. She looked much the same as before, lean, practical, grounded. But the lines around her eyes had softened slightly, not from ease, from understanding. She walked up the path without hesitation, boots steady, gaze moving across the structure before settling on Rowan. "You made it look like a house again," she said. Rowan shrugged slightly. "Still a lot wrong with it." Mara stepped onto the porch, glancing down at Ash. "He looks different." Rowan followed her gaze. "Yeah," a beat. He stopped expecting something to happen. Mara nodded slowly. "That's not nothing." She leaned lightly against one of the porch posts, crossing her arms. "They moved fast," she said after a moment. "Faster than I expected." Rowan looked at her. "And?" Mara exhaled. "They picked him up 3 days after you handed everything over." Rowan's expression didn't change. "Victor?" She nodded. Not dramatic, no chase, no scene. Just gone. That fit. Rowan leaned forward slightly. "And the rest?" Mara's mouth tightened just a fraction. "Worse than anyone thought." She paused, searching for the right words. Not to explain, but to place. Projects tied to his name started getting flagged. Then audited, then reopened. Contracts re-examined. Failures that were written off years ago suddenly weren't. Rowan didn't interrupt. Mara continued. Structural compromises, missing funds, altered reports. A breath. People died because of it, Rowan. More than one place. More than one time. The words settled heavily between them. Not surprising. Just confirmed. "And Elias?" Rowan asked. Mara's expression softened. They cleared his name, simple. Direct, but it carried weight. "Officially?" Rowan asked. "Officially," she replied. Rowan leaned back again, letting the silence stretch. The forest moved around them, wind through branches, leaves shifting, distant sounds of life continuing without pause. Mara studied him for a moment. "You're not surprised?" Rowan shook his head once. No, because he had seen it. Down there, in the way everything had been built, not for escape, not for survival, for proof. Ash lifted his head. Not sharply, not urgently, just enough. His ears shifted slightly, catching something beyond the immediate clearing. Rowan turned instinctively, eyes narrowing toward the tree line. Nothing moved. No sound followed. But Ash didn't look tense. He didn't stand. He simply watched. Then, after a long, quiet moment, he lowered his head again, resting, letting it go. Rowan felt it then. Not danger, not threat. Closure. For the first time since they had stepped into that house, there was nothing left coming. Mara followed Rowan's gaze, then looked back at him. "You keeping it?" she asked. Rowan glanced at the house. The wood, the repaired windows, the shape of something that had survived long enough to matter. "Yeah," he said. Not out of attachment, not even out of sentiment. Out of understanding. Mara nodded. "Good." She stepped off the porch, pausing halfway down the steps. "What are you going to do with it?" Rowan didn't answer immediately. He stood slowly, walking past Ash and into the doorway. Mara followed. Inside, the house no longer felt hollow, still quiet, still aged, but not empty. Rowan moved through the hall, past the staircase, toward the library. The wall had been sealed again, not hidden, just restored. The door remained behind it, but now it was protected, documented, preserved. He stepped into the room. On the far side, a frame hung on the wall. Simple, unadorned. Inside it, a photograph. Elias Ren. Taken years before everything had fallen apart. Younger, stronger, eyes steady, thoughtful, not lost, not broken, just aware. Rowan stood in front of it. For a long time, he didn't speak. Mara remained near the doorway, giving him space. Finally, Rowan exhaled. "They called him crazy," he said quietly. Mara nodded. "They usually do." Rowan's gaze didn't leave the photograph. He saw it before anyone else. "Yes." And he didn't stop. Mara's voice softened. "No." Rowan's jaw tightened slightly. Not with anger, but with recognition. He lost everything for it. A pause, then. Not everything. Rowan looked at her. Mara met his gaze. "He left something behind," she said. Rowan glanced back at the photograph, then around the room, the house, the land, the truth. He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. He did. They stepped back outside together. The air felt different now, not because the world had changed, but because something had been settled within it. Ash stood as Rowan approached. Not tense, not alert, just present. Rowan rested a hand briefly on the dog's head. "You knew," he said quietly. Ash looked up at him, steady, certain. Rowan gave a faint nod. "I just needed to catch up." He looked out toward the forest, toward everything that had led him here. The war, the silence, the mistakes he had carried for too long, and the one moment in that tunnel when he had chosen differently. Not to leave. Not again. Rowan exhaled slowly. "What he left wasn't this place," he said. Mara listened. "It was the responsibility." He paused, then added, quieter, "to not walk away." Ash moved beside him. No command, no hesitation. Rowan glanced down at him. A faint, almost invisible smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Yeah," he said. "This time, I listened." The wind moved gently through the trees, and for the first time in a long time, nothing felt unfinished. In the quiet after the storm, when the truth has finally been uncovered and the noise of fear fades away, what remains is something deeper than victory. It is the reminder that sometimes what we call coincidence is something far greater. A man inherits a broken place. A dog refuses to step forward. A hidden truth waits beneath the surface for decades, until the right moment, the right heart, and the right courage bring it to light. Some would call that luck, but others might see it as something else. A quiet miracle, a guiding hand. Because in life we are all standing in front of doors we do not understand. We are all given moments where we must choose between comfort and truth, between fear and faith. And sometimes the path forward does not come from logic alone, but from a voice within, or a sign we almost ignore. Maybe that voice is instinct, maybe it is love, or maybe it is God gently guiding us, even when we feel lost. Rowan thought he had lost his way. He stopped trusting himself. But the truth was never gone. It was waiting for him to listen again. And maybe that is the message we all need today. Even when life feels heavy, even when the world seems unfair, even when you feel like everything is falling apart, there is still a path. There is still a purpose. And sometimes, the greatest miracles are not loud or dramatic. They are quiet moments where you choose to do what is right, even when it costs you everything. If this story meant something to you, take a moment to share it with someone who might need to hear it. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from, and what part of this story stayed with you the most. And if you believe that stories like this matter, don't forget to subscribe to Veteran Dog Stories, because there are many more journeys waiting to be told. Wherever you are in your life right now, I pray that God watches over you, protects your path, and gives you the strength to stand for what is right, even when it is difficult. And may you never walk alone.